Hey everyone, welcome back to the ninth episode of Creative Cafe. I'm joined with Justina Brandt today. And Justina, do you want to give us a little bit about yourself and your creative background?
Sure. I'm a portrait photographer. I've been doing photography for pretty much my entire life, but I've been taking portraits for the last 6 years, I think. I also run an organization called MPS that works with young creatives in order to help them network and community build and have leadership opportunities. Um, I also have been doing art for a long time and do a lot of painting and drawing. And I've been invested in like music and theater, and so like all pretty much all of the arts.
That's cool. And okay, I already know Justina from how much? 3 years ago, I think, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, we
yeah.
like hosted a meetup for photography like 3 years ago. So yeah, I kind of pretty much know the information about here, but you guys don't. So I think it'll be really cool to learn more about her creative process, what goes into how she takes photos, and also like running MPS and things like that. So, first, how did you first get into photography? You mentioned like you've been pretty much involved your whole life. So, how did that all begin, anyways?
It's actually it's a little bit embarrassing, but okay, first my parents have always been invested in photography, and my dad used to take pictures a lot and worked as a photographer for a short period of his life, so he was always really invested in it. And as soon as he found out I was interested, he was super excited about it and got me my first camera and all, and was always like promoting that I was shooting. When I was in middle school, this is where it gets a little embarrassing.
Oh,
When I was in middle school, I started getting really interested in like YouTubers and influencer culture, and kind of like got into that whole phase. And I was like, I need good pictures of myself. So then I met up with a couple of my friends, and I was like, let's take pictures. And so obviously I started taking pictures of them, but I was like, well, I need pictures of myself too. And we shot the pictures, and I was like, oh, I'm not a model.
oh,
Now, now I know. Yeah. But I got really interested in, I was like, oh, these pictures I took of my friends are actually like, I really like them. And that was kind of where that interest started. And I ended up going on shoots with my friends a lot. And it was just, we'd hang out, go in my backyard and take pictures. But like for a lot of photographers, was just kind of where it started. And then, yeah, I kind of continued with that through middle school. And then I met Tyler pretty early on in high school, and that was kind of one of the first people I met who was I met through photography and met through social media because I've been running an Instagram account for a long time. And then kind of in high school, I started taking it on a more professional track.
that's cool. Where do you see your photography in like let's just say like 10 years? Like, do you have any goals in particular for like your photography or?
Yeah. I really like doing portrait photography, but I've been starting to kind of work some more with brands and get more into working with fashion, which is something that I'm super excited about and I really like doing. I actually don't really have any desire to do photography as a career. It's kind of more something that I really enjoy doing as both a hobby and like kind of a part-time job, and as something on the side. And so I'm super passionate about it, but I don't necessarily like want to become a photographer. So 10 years from now, I would hope that I'm still doing photography and I'm still shooting. I think
Or
being
imagine when you're 80 and like still taking photos of like
oh
the
yeah.
birds in the yard or something.
No, 100%. I mean, that'd be awesome. And like, my hope is to be able to kind of continue working with more brands and working with, celebrities would be super cool. Who knows? But, I also, a lot of the things that I find the most rewarding about photography is just shooting with regular people who DM me and are like, I've never done this before. I have no idea what I'm doing, but you know what? I want to take photos with you. And I'm like, awesome. And like, so as much as I want to be able to kind of progress and, work my way up, I also always want to kind of keep that same connection to people where they feel comfortable shooting with me, even if they've never done it before.
That's cool. So based on like what you just said, it's kind of like for the people, for at least like the people that have never, gone on a photo shoot before. I think it's cool that it kind of inspires them in a way. Would you say that's true?
I
Of
would
like,
hope. Yeah. Yeah. Probably the most rewarding thing for me as a photographer is having experiences with people where they might be pretty nervous before, or even if they do feel comfortable, but it's kind of like their first experience ever doing something like this, and they come back and get their photos and are happy with them. And it's like, I think seeing people's excitement with that and being able to see themselves in this, unique way, maybe the way that they see other like models or influencers, but seeing themselves as that, that's what's most rewarding to me. So, whether or not my photography itself inspires them, the thing that matters the most to me is that they're able to see themselves in this new way and be able to gain self-confidence and see themselves as beautiful. And that's something that I care a lot about.
That's cool. Yeah, I really like that. Oh yeah, about MPS. So like I know you okay, you do like a ton of stuff for MPS and like you're pretty much managing it like day in day out like every meetup and stuff planning that. Like what else goes into like your whole process behind, being able to balance that along with like I know you're not in school yet, right? But when that comes around, like how do you balance everything?
Yeah, it's not easy. I think I've always been, I've been a busy person for like as long as I can remember. So I've definitely developed a lot of habits in order to be managing my time well and keeping up with everything. I think I keep a very organized schedule. I have my little Apple calendar, and like that's how I managed like literally my entire life. I don't know what I would do if I didn't have it. But I think like specifically with NPS, I kind of always know the certain things that are like constant responsibilities. So, for example, I'll post on our blog called NPS Perspective every single Saturday. So I always know when Saturday comes around, I'm like, that's something that I have to do. That's never going to change. The harder ones are going to be kind of like one-off things. For example, I run this thing called the Monthly Collective, where people can submit to NPS to get their work published in a certain like monthly article, and that always opens on the 5th and closes on the 15th. And that's something that I kind of have to set reminders for, especially being at home. I'm not really thinking about the dates as much because every day feels so similar. Um, but yeah, I guess just my biggest thing is like being hyper organized because I have more time now. It's easier, being at home, but I will be back at school pretty soon, and keeping track of all of that stuff, I definitely have to be very organized with.
It seems like like despite like how much there is, like you're really on top of it. Like are there any times where like you've had like struggle with staying organized with everything? It doesn't even have to be just MPS, but like say like schoolwork or like when you were working.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like,
And also like shoots, like bookings and stuff.
yeah, yeah, definitely. I've noticed, especially you brought up shoots. It's a good one. Is that I will either respond to messages instantly because I'll be like sitting at my desk being like, okay, this is my time to respond to all my messages, or it'll take me like 3 days, and there's kind of nothing in
I
between.
feel that.
Yeah, yeah, and so I think I definitely like I'll miss deadlines. I'll do takeovers on like MPS Instagram a week before our meetup. And I think there was like 2 times where I have to send the login info to people and I've just completely forgotten. And so, you know, I definitely will have my moments where I'll miss stuff and, forget. And, it happens. I think it's kind of inevitable if, you know, I've made the decision that I want to take on doing a ton of stuff and having a lot of responsibility. And so it's inevitable that sometimes you're going to miss things. And I think for me, it's like sometimes, like I used to be really hard on myself about that. I would kind of be like, why did I forget this? Like, you should have known, like you had this whole calendar. And the thing is, sometimes you just slip up on things. And that's something that like I personally had to, be able to come to terms with. Is like, I can do my best to keep up with everything in my life, but I also there's going to be times when, I miss things.
Yeah, I feel like yeah, that's perfectly fine, because we're all bound to like have that happen, especially if we're at that scale of, that amount of stuff to do, or get done. Oh, by the way, I feel like people probably might not know what MPS is, or at least this audience, because I know we have like mutual friends and stuff, and like they know what it is, obviously. But I do have a more of a different audience on here. I'm not sure if they know what MPS exactly is. Do you want to give a little bit more insight about, like what is MPS and everything about that?
Yeah, for sure. I've gotten into the habit of explaining it because a lot of people kind of don't really know what it is. But so basically, NPS is an organization that works to help. It focuses on young photographers and models right now, but we definitely like expand to all different types of creators in order to help them have networking and community building opportunities, education, and leadership. That's kind of our starting. Um, Focuses. And there's also, we say that it's regardless of level of experience. So we have people who've been doing their creative work for years and people who have just started a couple months ago. And our focus as an organization is to be able to provide resources so they're able to kind of work on starting their business, work on taking it to the next level, so you aren't so limited to just doing photography with people or um, just doing only being able to like present your art to like your families and friends. Of course there's a benefit to that, but we want to make sure that if you want to start taking it to that next level, MPS provides the resources for that. So our main, I kind of mentioned the main categories are going to be community building, education, and leadership opportunities. So we do our community building primarily through our monthly meetups. And we've been keeping up with those for years now. That's kind of how we started. And
Going to be 3 years in what, October? Yeah, October
yes,
1st.
exactly. I know it's only like a week away.
Oh, wow.
But there's kind of we think that that's really important because that's our way for people to get to meet each other, to get to you know, find new people to work with and also just make new friends. One of the most rewarding things for me, watching this as somebody who puts on these events is seeing random people who are meeting for the first time, hanging out and just like having a good time.
Mhm.
There's a lot of benefit to being able to create work together, but also just to hang out. And then through education, I run a blog called NPS Perspective. And so it's kind of it's a pretty big entity of NPS. It's this like separate website that's like part of the website, but also, different. And that's where we have interviews with different creatives. A lot of them are, also young, maybe like late teens, early 20s. Um, and they're from all over the world. We have people in Europe, we have people in America. It's really cool. There's a lot of um, ways you can learn from people there. And then we also have what to know articles that are basically fairly simple, but they're ways to kind of just like learn about different things. A lot of it kind of focuses on the more professional side of running a business that's freelance and creative. And then we have who to watch, which is kind of like feature pages that'll say like our favorite minimalist photographers. So they tend to be pretty specific, but they're a way for people to be able to kind of get inspiration. And then lastly is our leadership opportunities, and that is through our ambassador and team member programs. So those are things that people can get involved in. They're able to, serve as representatives for MPS. So Tyler is also a team member of MPS, and then we have two others, and then we have about 15 ambassadors who help promote on social media. Give us feedback on what we can do for our community. So yeah, that's the long answer of what MPS is. Kind of hard to
How
summarize.
could, if people wanted to get involved, how could they?
There's so
Or
many ways
maybe
to get involved.
if they're even out of state?
Oh yeah, for sure. So there's lots of ways you can do it. The most basic one is literally just to start using our hashtags. We have hashtag NPS Creatives, and so people can post their work, tag it to that, and then we'll be reposting features. I go through the hashtag fairly regularly because I'm just curious to see what people are doing. And we have that's kind of our easiest way to have people who are out of state, out of the country, able to participate. And then if you want to kind of take the next level of involvement, you're able to submit to stuff like the job board, which is where people can post, promote themselves, or say like, I'm looking for a photographer or model for this specific project. And there's no limit to where that has to be located. And then lastly, we do our ambassadors. We have a couple, or actually, don't think we actively have out of state ones, but we are working on. We've been connecting with
So
people
maybe
outside.
Kira.
Yes, true.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do. So we do have out of state ambassadors, and they're literally just representatives. We have a group chat where we all talk, but there's kind of no need for them to necessarily be um, in California. So yeah.
Also, like for monthly collective, it's not people can submit like art and stuff too, right?
Yes. Yeah, I skipped that one. That the monthly collective is our most like diverse part of MPS right now. And that's I think did I already explain? I may have.
I don't remember.
It's okay.
Slightly.
I'll
Yeah.
just repeat it. Yeah, it's a way that people can email us their creative work and can have a chance to be featured on our website. And it's definitely our most kind of diverse part of MPS. We've had it's primarily models and photographers, but we also have had artists submit work. We had somebody who once wrote a song and submitted a
Oh
video of
wow,
it.
that's cool.
Yeah, it's super cool. So
Can it
we
write like can someone submit like a short story, for instance?
yeah, it's
For any
literally any
writers out there. I know some of
exactly.
them are watching, so like
Yeah.
yeah, that's cool. What what's like the most unique thing you've seen probably on Monthly Collective? Or has it or have you like pretty much listed everything?
I think the song was really cool. I was kind of it was actually made by a friend of mine and she was like, "I want to submit a song." And I was like, "You know what? Go for it." And she made this like cute little lyric video and that was really cool cuz we've always kind of had a target focus on models and photographers, but we're trying to expand to, incorporate all different types of artists. And so that was pretty cool to kind of be able to see something totally unique and still benefiting from the services that MPS does.
That's cool. And also to add on to that, like I just remember like one of my friends DM'd me one day because after you put out one of the issues of Monthly Collective, he's like, "Hey, look, I got on." She was like super excited, that she got onto yeah, that latest issue. And so I think it's just really cool, that providing people the opportunity like to get their work seen.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I've had a couple people who will like respond because we do it all through email for the monthly collective, just to kind of keep it easier. And I always email people being like, "Hey, your work was featured. Here's a link to it." And I've had a couple people respond, and they're super excited about that. And that always makes me feel so good because I'm like, we're doing something for other people, and seeing that
Yeah.
they're excited about what we're doing is great.
Yeah, that kind of brings me to like what's like the message behind NPS? You kind of like touched on it a little bit, but like
Yeah, I would say that you know, looking kind of the greater purpose that I see MPS is that encouraging youth creativity is something that's really important to me. A lot of what I learned about running my own photography business and like networking and running social media and all of that, and carrying myself professionally, like that was all self-taught. And a lot of the message that I got for a long time is that you can't, or not that you can't, but it's really, really hard to take your creative interests and turn them professional and meet new people through it, and kind of like that creative interests are really just a hobby, and it's really hard to do anything more than that. And I think a lot of people get told that same message, and it's true to an extent that it's definitely not an easy thing to get into, but it's entirely not impossible. And so through MPS, obviously we can't do all of it, but we want to be able to be a platform saying, "Hey, we want to encourage you to be doing this. We want to encourage you meeting new people and, you know, taking your work to a more professional level and, being featured." And, like we care a lot about, encouraging youth creativity. And so when I think what is the message behind it, I think to me the message is that I guess like anything is possible, and that, you know, there isn't a limit. It's like it's not going to be easy, but I care a lot about encouraging people and telling them that if you have a creative interest and you want to take that further and take that to the next level, you 100% can. And I'm going to help you with that.
that's cool. And I think you kind of touched on it briefly, um, but I feel like there's a misconception of there's so, like they might say like, oh, there's so much competition. Let's just say like the photography market, right? Because it's so saturated or things like that, and people might have their guard up, I guess, towards things like networking and things like that because like they want to get you know as many clients as they can. But I think that there's a lot of value in meeting like-minded creators in like your field. Like, what would you say about that?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And even personally, that's something that I've been learning. I I've been running my own photography as a business since freshman year. You know, obviously I've like changed it a lot and learned a lot, but I basically started treating it more professionally a few years ago. And I think the thing that I struggled the most with when doing that was learning how to like basically like learning what it means to conduct yourself professionally. And I think it's really hard to kind of get those resources and to learn. And when a lot of what's out there is targeted towards people who are doing this as a full-time career, because that
Mhm.
wasn't what I was trying to do. I was like, I want to sell photo shoots. I want to make some money off of it. I want to conduct myself professionally. But I'm also still in high school. I'm still, have sports and homework and all of that. And I think that it can be kind of a difficult thing to be learning about. And when it comes to networking too, I think that's, a very real thing. It can be kind of scary to take those first steps. And, I've been learning a lot about that because in this past like couple months, I've met a lot more photographers and I've done like photography collabs with like people who I met over the internet and all. And I even started like reaching out to people to shoot. And obviously I wouldn't charge them because I was reaching out, but I was always a little bit scared to do that. And one of those times that I did that ended up being one of the shoots that I got the most exposure for. So, it can be a scary thing,
Is that the
but
dog one?
actually no, it was
Oh,
the shoot with this girl Vanessa.
okay. I'm
Yeah,
not sure if
and
I've probably seen it, but I don't know who that is.
yeah. Yeah, but, it definitely can be kind of a scary thing to get started with, and that's kind of where through MPS, it's like I wanna be able to make that a little bit less scary.
Aside from like photography and MPS, are you involved in any other creative projects? I think at the beginning you mentioned that you used to do art. Is that something that you still do, or like, is there anything else creative that you do now?
Yeah, for sure. I definitely like, I'm a creative person. Like, when it comes to, like, math and science and like, that's definitely not my thing, but, yeah, I do art. I've taken, like, realism art classes for I took it for about 9 years, and, I had to stop because around I guess about a year ago, I started getting really busy because I was working and, it was kinda hard, and then COVID happened, so I wasn't able to take classes. I do wanna go back, because it's kinda my last year to do it, but, we'll see what happens with that, but I've taken, like, AP art at my school and, I've done, like, a lot of painting and all. Actually, that one is up there
Oh, the
is
owl?
literally that's from, like, the 6th grade. It's really old, but, there you go.
Nice.
Yeah, and then I've been kinda getting more into writing. I've always liked to do it, but I never really I never used to do it a lot, but, I write for my, like, school magazine called The Margazine, and, I also kind of, like I guess it connects to, like, some, like, graphic design too, because 'cause I've, like, worked with, like, designing the website and all and have a lot of, like, involvement with that, but I've been, like, writing, a lot about, like, social issues and, like, political topics and all for that. Um I don't know. I think that's kind of it. I did theater when I was in, like, middle
Oh,
school.
right. Yeah. I remember.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I also have an interest in film. I haven't done a ton of it, but, it's always kind of that thing that, like, I'm like, "Oh, I really wanna learn more about," but, I've been really busy. It's kinda hard to find time, but yeah.
Do any of the skills in your different creative projects, do any of those overlap, or can you apply something you learned from, let's just say, art into your photography? Maybe something like composition, things like that. Like, what
Yeah,
would you
for
say?
sure. It's kind of interesting because, being trained in art, it's like, you I think a lot of people will kind of, if you haven't taken the classes, it kind of seems like it's like you learn about like how to like draw stuff and it's very like specific skills, but it's really not, like I'll find myself, especially when I'm editing, using like things that I learned from like color theory in order to help to, create more balance and like how to like set up pictures. And then stuff like the rule of thirds, I think I learned that first in art and then ended up using it in photography. And like, I mean, that's something you kind of learn in both, but
Mhm.
there's overlap. And I think they're definitely kind of like the fundamental skills you learn in art isn't unique to just painting or just drawing or, any specific kind of thing. Like stuff like color theory or stuff like, you know, rules for like how proportions and all, like that's stuff that is applicable anywhere. And so I definitely will end up kind of reusing that. I think the color theory one is the first one I thought of because that's something
Yeah,
I wouldn't even think about. But like now I kind of like subconsciously do it just from knowing it from art class. But yeah.
it's pretty cool. In that case, would you encourage other creators to possibly like dabble in multiple different, creative fields? Even not even to like to a large extent, but even to just like try it out and maybe learn a thing or two that they could apply to their primary creative passion?
I would say so. Yeah. I think I don't think it's totally necessary to be like taking like weekly art classes in order to learn more about your photography. Like I think you
Yeah.
can do that. But like when it comes to like learning about like rules about art or learning, like fundamental things, like I think something like color theory or something like, learning people's proportions or how to do perspective and all, like just kind of understanding the principles that like make those kinds of things that show up in art. Like that's stuff that, like I said, it covers all different kinds of art. So I think taking the time to kind of learn about that or learn about like rules of like composition, even if you're doing it through photography, is going to be something that's really useful in all different kinds of art.
That's true. And what would you advise someone, let's just say someone watching right now hasn't really done photography before, but it's something that they're kind of interested in now? Like, what would you encourage as like first steps into it?
This sounds this is literally what like everybody says, but I would just say like start like shooting a lot, and like if you're interested in like portrait photography, like go out with your friends and take pictures and just kind of keep practicing at it because like I definitely know that I'm the kind of person who's like I want to be good at stuff. Like I want to go from not knowing it to being good. And that whole like practicing phase in the middle, I'm like not a fan of. But I also like I mean I'm still learning stuff with every new shoot. Like a year ago I feel like I've improved a lot since then. And I think there's a lot, you just kind of have to like keep practicing. And I also think kind of like looking at other people's work and seeing what they do and kind of like taking inspiration from it. I don't think it helps much to copy. I do sometimes see people being like,
Hmm.
well, I can learn if I copy from somebody else. And I kind of disagree with that. But I think if you're looking, always gathering information, getting new ideas, that's a great place to start. And then also just if you have an idea, just try it. Even if you're like, I don't know if this is gonna look good and I have no idea this could be weird, just try it. I do that all the time on shoots. I'll be like, okay, I have an idea for this thing you're gonna do, like for a model, and then they'll be like, what? And I'm like, we're gonna try it. And it might look ugly, and I'll take the picture and I'll be like, oh, that was terrible. But you know what? We tried it. And I think that's a really good way to kind of just be experimenting and constantly pushing yourself.
Nice. And also, I think it's important to also note, like, you don't need like the high end equipment, just to get started and things like that. Like, even
Oh
just
yeah.
like your phone, you can take photos with.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't remember what my first camera was, but it was one of the really basic, like I think it was like an 18 to 55 millimeter lens. Like, it was a super basic, like starting like DSLR that a lot of people have. And I was able to do so much off of that. Like I shot for a few years before I ever upgraded to my like first like actual more professional camera. And so I often get asked like, what's the best gear to start with? I'm like, you know what, just start with that because it like to me it's so much more important to learn how to like learn rules about like composition and how to be putting creating your photos and how to be taking good photos in the first place than having good gear because then if you have the good gear then you can make those even better, but
Yeah.
having a good gear doesn't guarantee a good picture. That makes sense.
Hmm. Like, you need to know how to use it properly, and like the like a better gear will help to an extent, but not as much as actually like learning how to use it and like the skill, I guess, that you have in terms of taking them.
For sure. And I think also in, developing your own skills, that's where you find your own like creative vision and like where you're able to start making your work more unique. Because a lot of people are going to have good gear and a lot of people have the same gear. And it's more
Mhm.
about how you use it and how you create your own like photography that's what's going to create your own unique vision. And, that's something that you just have to kind of develop out of practice.
Kind of just made me think, like, do you have like a particular style? Like, do you think you have a style for your photography? And then also just kind of going off of like we just mentioned, I feel like just practicing more, you kind of just develop your style.
Mhm. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I like for a long time, I would think I'd have a style and then I'd change it. And so I'd kind of just be going back and forth with that. And I guess like the thing I think is more unique about like my photos is that, you know, I don't really use a traditional portrait lens when I take pictures. My I think my lens is like a 28 to 135 millimeter. I'm really bad at like my names. It's probably not good, but it's fine. It's something like that. And, that's a zoom lens. That's not traditionally, the kind of lens that you would use. It doesn't have like a super shallow depth of field or anything. Like, it's a pretty like flexible lens. But the thing is, I really like using that because forces me to think about that forces me to think about the picture as a whole. So I have to be looking at like, you know, what composition am I going to have, all around? How am I going to have the model pose? Like, what are the angles? What are, like there's a lot to think about. And I do a lot more that kind of like features more full body stuff rather than just like standard portraits. And it's totally like a stylistic thing. I think, I'm not trying to say that like one's better than the other or anything, but kind of by forcing myself to use a lens that's not particularly um designed for portraits, and you don't have the crutch of like just being able to like blur out the background and so much. um you know I think that's kind of pushes me, and it makes it a little bit more difficult, but it's also kind of created my own style, and I've been able to kind of learn a lot through that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Would uh, do you think people even really need a particular style? I feel like people, like, if they don't have one, I think that's perfectly fine too.
Sorry, did you say particular style?
Yeah,
Okay, I don't think
because
so,
sometimes, because
honestly.
even for me, like, I don't even think I kind of just take like whatever I feel like, whatever I think looks good to me. You know what I mean? Like,
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't think you need it. I mean, I think that's kind of gonna end up combining you creatively more,
mhm. Instead
Like,
of being restricted to like a certain way that you need to like take a photo.
oh, for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, yeah. I mean, you know, I would say that's my closest style. But if you ever look at my work, like it's all over the place. There's tons of different kinds of things. And, I think it's more interesting to be able to kind of push yourself. And that's something that honestly, I started doing a lot more shooting like early this summer. And a lot of like what I've been doing is kind of being like, how can I push myself to try all these different styles, to, do different things. Um, and so I don't think you need a particular style. I think you're gonna kind of develop one on your own without having to
Mhm.
actively be like, I want to shoot pictures like this. The more practice you have, you're gonna start to see some consistencies, but I don't think you have to actively look for it.
Yeah. And also, like, I see even other creators too. Like, I see, beginning artists, like, they have in their bios, like, oh, still trying to find my style, or like they have, like, oh, inconsistent style. Like, I think that maybe there should be less emphasis on trying to find it, like you were saying, like, actively trying to find it, and more just like creating what you want to create.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, so I think we're gonna wrap up this episode a little bit. Justina, do you want to offer any last tips or advice for anyone listening right now?
So yeah, I think that my advice to people would just be, if you have an interest in something creative, just to kind of go for it and see what happens. And it may not be your thing. It may be just something you try and you're like, I don't really think I want to keep doing this. Or it could be something that you end up being super passionate about and sticking with. I mean, I probably didn't think I was going to be sticking with photography for the next 6 years after I started it. And here we are. And I think the other, actually, it's another thing. I think if you are already, working as a photographer and kind of getting started, and you feel like, you aren't experiencing the kind of success that you thought you would, I mean, that's definitely kind of a hard thing to be seeing. But I think it's important to keep in mind that everybody's process is different, and a lot of the kinds of success that you might see other people get, or in a shorter period of time than you, a lot of it is purely just luck. I wouldn't say that I've had any huge successes, but the successes I have partially been, or honestly, they've mostly been just because I've gotten lucky and happened to, had the right connections and it just worked out. And the thing that you do have control over is how long you're working, and continuing to keep pushing and keep learning more and doing more. Um you know that's the thing that you can control, and I think it's super important to stick with that and be able to keep working, because you never know what's going to happen.
Yeah, because it's a process, and it takes time to fully develop it and like reach a certain level that you want to be at.
For sure. Yeah. And, I think definitely there were periods along the way where I'd be a couple years in and I was like, I see other photographers who've been shooting for 2 years and have been able to have these great successes. And even I'll be like, I feel like I'm as good as them. Like, why am I not experiencing the same things? And, that's not something that you can fully control. And there's not really any reason why it'll work out for someone like that. And a lot of it, like I said, is just purely out of luck. But, I do think it's always important to kind of be, keep focusing on your own goals and pushing yourself and continue working, because that's going to be the thing that'll eventually, lead you to opportunities.
I think that's a great point to end the episode on. And everyone, thank you for watching today's episode and stay tuned for the next one. See ya.